Thank you for joining us this evening. We are really delighted to see you, and we hope that you will find this webinar informative and helpful. Um, this webinar is designed to be both practical and also compassionate to provide support to anyone who has been impacted or affected by suicide. And we're delighted that we have guest speaker Liz Gleeson joining us this evening. Liz is a grief psychotherapist, an educator, and a creator of the Shapes of Grief training program and podcast. This webinar this evening will provide insight on how traumatic loss can shape the grieving process. Liz is going to explore the possible physical and emotional impacts of grieving after a traumatic loss and consider how best to support ourselves when experiencing both trauma and grief. So, I'm going to give just a couple of little housekeeping notes to everyone before I hand over to Liz. Just to let you know that we can't see you. You can see us, but we cannot see you. This webinar is being recorded, so only myself and Liz and my colleague Arlene will be actually recognizable as images on the screen. You will not appear within the recording. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A button or a chat button. So please do feel free to put in any comments or feedback or suggestions in there. Time won't allow us to answer individual questions, but we will, of course, be able to reflect on any of the comments or feedback. And indeed, you can contact us after the webinar with anything specific, and we will absolutely do our best to get back to you with the answers to your questions. And, you can remain anonymous. You don't have to enter any names into any comments at all. If you would like any support, any specific support, don't be worrying about taking down notes. We will have slides at the very end with the names of organizations and places where you can contact for more support. This will be available. It'll stay on screen for several minutes after we finish to give you time to write anything down. And don't forget, our website, hugg.ie, will have all of this information on it as well. So we will not leave you without any support. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Liz. I see Liz has her camera on. Thanks, Liz, and my colleague Arlene. So you can see there's the three of us. So Arlene is my colleague here in HUGG, and Arlene's going to give us some feedback from your comments or suggestions at the end of the webinar. And Liz is going to come on straight after I give you a little bit of information on HUGG straight into our main event, which is the trauma webinar. Okay, thank you, ladies. So, a little bit of information about HUGG for those of you on this call who may not be familiar with us. We are a national suicide bereavement organisation. We established in 2017, and we are very unique in Ireland in that each and every person who works with us, either as a staff member or as a group facilitator or a volunteer, have themselves been impacted by suicide. So that means we're bringing what we call our lived experience to all of the work that we provide. We don't provide clinical support, but we do provide many therapeutic supports. And we do this because we know how difficult getting through suicide bereavement is and the impacts that it has on each and every individual, their family, friends, and communities. So what do we provide in HUGG? We provide a menu of different services, and all of the services are free of charge and they're open-ended. And what we mean by that is that you can come and make use of our services as often or as little as you like. So over here, you'll see a few little icons to explain what they are. First and foremost, we provide information, and the information is provided on our website. which has a host of podcasts, materials, and practical information on both, what you might feel after losing someone to suicide, about grief, information about suicide, and on all of the organizations in Ireland that can help and support you. We also provide support groups, and these are places where people can come either every second week or every month, right around the country. They are looked after by our volunteers who are trained with HUGG. And these are a very special place, a safe space where people can come and just talk about their loss, talk about their feelings. And through that, giving and listening to other people, gain a huge amount of support. We have 20 of these support groups around the country, and they're available in person, online, and hybrid, which means that you could be attending as a virtual member or in person. And there's a list of them available on our website. We also have a telephone support service, which is available Monday to Friday. And this is where somebody can pick up the phone and speak to one of our telephone supporters who are there to give you compassionate support, to listen to you. You may want to talk about your loved one. You may not know exactly what you want to talk about. You might just want to be heard. And it doesn't matter whether your bereavement is recent or many, many years past. The line is there available to you. Our telephone supporters can give you information on what we can offer and also connect you to other organizations that may be able to assist you. And that could be something practical, could be something financial, could be something to do with a coroner's court, a whole host of services. And we are very happy to signpost to those supports. And we also have many events and webinars throughout the country, webinars such as this. We host them online, and we have many events in person to give you a chance to meet people face to face if you don't wish to go to a support group. We offer things like walks, pop-up cafes, and even creative events like our memorial quilt making. So you are very welcome to come to any of those. And finally, just to let you know that we hold an annual remembrance service every November. This is available to come in person in the Unitarian Church on St. Stephen's Green in Dublin, or indeed you can attend in online because it will be broadcast live. And that event is coming up on Sunday, gosh, I have a mind blank, in 2 weeks' time. And the details are on our website again. So I do hope that you will make use of some of our services, because we know that all of these services are based on the fact that being bereaved by suicide is unique. It is a unique grief. We know this, not just from what, as bereaved people ourselves, but from the research which underpins all of our work. We know that many people, when they've been bereaved, blame themselves unnecessarily. They carry stigma and shame, and that awful question of why, the question that has no answer. All of these lead to the difficult journey that the suicide bereavement has. But I want you to know that there is support. There are lighter and brighter days. Time is our friend. And with connection to the supports and to the people that are there to support you in whatever that may look like, many of these awful symptoms, if you like, of trauma and grief after suicide can and will be alleviated. I hope you're going to gain many insights from what Liz Gleeson is going to share with you now. It's an important topic, and it's a topic that I know we get asked about many times, about trauma and suicide. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my slides now, and I'm going to invite Liz on screen and hand it over to Liz for this evening's webinar. So thank you for listening to me.
Thanks very much, Fiona. And just to say that remembrance event is on the 9th of November at 2 p.m.
Thank
Um,
you, Liz. That's my aging brain forgetting these things.
okay, now bear with me just a minute while I get my slides up. Um, let's see, here we go. There, does that look okay, Fiona and Arlene? Fantastic. Okay. I have so much information here to share with everybody this evening. Um, we're going to look at grief and grieving. We're also going to look at trauma and also how does trauma impact the grieving process. Now, if you're like me, you might take in 10 or 20% of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you. But the webinar is recorded. So if there's anything that feels useful or there feels like there's too much information, please know that you can look at this again and again and again if it's useful to you. There will be things I say that may not resonate with you at all. Please just take what's helpful, what's useful today, and store that away somewhere to use. And whatever doesn't feel useful or feels untimely, please just let that go. The intention certainly is to offer information and insight that will help you at some stage, at some place that, along your journey of grieving. And that may not be today, but this might be really helpful in a few months' time. So please bear that in mind. Um, Also, if you see on the screen here, I've shared a picture of a candle and some lavender, somebody smelling their wrist, some bubble wrap, lemon, the taste of lemon, and bird song. These images represent our senses. And it's a really good grounding, a really good anchoring practice to have something. I have a little candle here, to have something that you can look at, or maybe something you can hold in your hands and feel, or something you can smell or even taste while you're here during the webinar, just to resource you and keep you in the present moment. One of the things about trauma is it can bring us back to something that has happened in the past. And that's not always helpful. It's sometimes necessary, but it's not always helpful. So if you want to take a minute to grab something that you can maybe hold in your hands, or I know for me, it's smell is a really powerful anchoring, or something that you can look at. And just a little image here, some of the really powerful ways of staying grounded. What do we mean by grounded? Staying present in our bodies. Often when we're anxious, we're thinking about something that's happened in the past, or we're thinking about something that might happen in the future. So by coming into our senses, smelling something, touching something, staying grounded in the earth, even touching someone, holding hands with someone, sitting alongside someone, that can help us be in the present moment, where we can get a sense of safety. So, what is grief and what is grieving? We often mix them up. Grief is like a constellation of internal emotions. It's not just sadness after someone we love has died. It can involve guilt, yearning, disorientation, overwhelm, anxiety. Grief is a cluster of emotions that we feel throughout our lives, really. But after a significant loss, it's like the volume goes up really high on this emotion. Grief is something that we feel forever because, we feel anxiety from time to time throughout our lives. We feel joy from time to time throughout our lives. Grief is a normal, natural human emotion, and we will feel it throughout our lives. And obviously, we will often feel it with the volume right up when we're thinking about someone we love. Grieving, however, is the process that we have to go to adapt to the loss. It's a process that happens over time. It involves many changes. These are psychological changes, emotional changes, maybe spiritual changes, social changes. Grieving is the process that we go through as we try to adapt to the world without the person that we love. Grieving doesn't last forever for most people. So while grief can linger, it can settle down and come back on birthdays and anniversaries. This grieving process, this adapting, does happen over a period of time. I hate talking about time with grief, but maybe 12 months or 18 months or 2 years or 3 years. For everybody, it's different. But grieving usually doesn't last forever. Grief is a normal, natural, adaptive, healthy response to loss. It's not a mental health issue, and it's not a problem to be fixed. It is often incredibly distressing, emotionally painful, and difficult to manage. But it is a normal, psychologically adaptive, positive response to loss. It endures to greater or lesser degrees throughout our lifetime, but the intensity of grief can become more manageable as bit by bit we learn to carry it. Everyone grieves differently, and we all have different grieving styles also. So some people are quite emotional and intuitive in how they grieve. We like to cry, we like to talk about it, we like to seek solace and support. Other people are more problem solvers. I want to plant a tree or run a marathon or fix the fence or Google information. There's no right way. And often we sort of oscillate between both of these different styles. But it can really help, I think, particularly in a couple, to understand why maybe your partner is grieving in a very different way to the way that you are. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with either of you. It could just be that you've different styles of grieving. For many of us, we have lost somebody really important to us who has died, and we talk about this as the primary loss. But for every primary loss, there's many ripples. We have secondary losses. Maybe we lose some of our friends. They don't show up or they can't show up. Maybe our identity is challenged. Maybe our dreams and our plans for the future, or our assumptions about the future, where we assume life is going to look a certain way, those assumptions get shattered and we're not prepared for, what the future holds now. We can't imagine it. We can't see what that looks like. So really important to know that we don't just grieve that primary loss, but there may be many, many secondary losses or ripple effects that we're also grieving. I won't stay on grief too long, but I do want to show what a sort of an adaptive response to loss is when it comes to grief. We aren't emotional all of the time. There are times or moments in the day where we feel laden down by the weight of our loss. We might be full of it. We might be crying. We might think of nothing else. We might, really be struggling with the pain of grief. And then at other times of the day, we're tending to life. We're making dinner. Maybe we're bringing somebody to school, or we're tending to an older relative. And a normal sort of grieving process is back and forth between these two areas, that loss orientated, where we feel the grief deeply, and then also that restoration where we're putting out the bins, getting dinner made, maybe ordering something online. Now, restoration often isn't that restorative. It is pushing forward. It is getting things done that need to be done, but that can be really hard too. So it's not like we get a break from the grief, then we go and grieve, then we get a break. No, both of it is laborious. It's hard work, but we're thinking about the past and our loss, and then we're also pushing forward. And sorry, just a quick one on this, and I will be talking much more about trauma later. But when we think of this as a good, normal, adaptive process, this process can be really hindered by the presence of trauma, because trauma can really sort of freeze our process. We can get stuck and we're not maybe in loss orientation or restoration and orientation. We can get stuck in either side or somewhere in between. So a good way of sort of knowing if we're grieving, in a way that's helpful for us is we're moving back and forth between both of these. At some point, at the beginning, we might just be quite frozen in fear and shock and anxiety. But as time passes on, as Fiona said so beautifully, time is our friend. We want to see this movement in and out. Likewise, telling the story of our loss is so important because often when a shocking event happens, it's our bodies that take it. It's our senses take it in, but it's so shocking and difficult for us that it's hard for us to process and integrate that. It's hard for that to come into our bodies as a memory or as something that has happened. So by telling the story, making sense of it with our brain and using words and going over it again and again, we're sort of helping our brain and our body to link up and integrate with each other. So telling the story over and again with whoever will listen in a positive, safe manner can be super, super helpful. Briefly, there are no stages of grief, okay? We don't have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then we're done. We've done grieving. There are no stages, but there are psychological tasks that most of us have to do in order to process that loss or, learn how to carry it or learn how to be in the world after a significant loss has happened. And I don't want to go into too much theory, but accepting the reality of the loss. This is an important one because knowing that somebody has died and also fully believing it to be true are two different things. So we can get the information that someone we love has died, but actually downloading that information in a way that feels really, really true can honestly take a long time, 12 to 18 months, because our brain has to update. We're not like an app on an iPhone when something happens, when someone we love dies, that we can press update and then our brain has it. No, our brain has to experience the loss over and over again to actually update itself, to create new neural pathways. Many of us don't want to accept the reality of the loss because if I update and download the truth of this, then I'm going to feel the pain of this. Unfortunately, and I wish I had a magic wand that could make this different, but the only way through grief is to grieve. Pain is the agent of change. It's to feel the pain, to let it in, to let it move through our bodies, to expand our capacity somehow to hold that pain is what will change that pain. And then we need to get used to the world without this person in it and eventually reinvest in life. Now, for some of you here today, you maybe can't imagine that, and that's really normal. But in time, as Fiona said, time is our friend. In time, we might feel, I might go back to work, or I might join that yoga class again. Now, these 4 steps aren't linear. They don't come one after the other. We mightn't do any of them. We might do all of them. And it might all be happening all at the same time beneath our consciousness. A bereaved mother came up with this idea when somebody asked her, you just look at the top row there, does your grief shrink in time? Does it get better over time? So if I'm the jar and the ball is grief, over time, is it going to shrink? And this bereaved mother said, it's not quite like that. I kind of feel like my grief is there, like a ball in my belly all of the time, but I've changed. I've grown. My capacity to hold this new life, this pain I've been through has increased. My capacity is stretched. So my jar, if you like, is bigger. The grief is still there, but there's room for other things now also. So that's quite a nice visual that a lot of people appreciate. And then, of course, we don't move on or get over loss. We learn to live with it, and we don't forget about our loved ones or, get over them. We continue a bond with them. So there's a lovely quote from Tuesdays with Mary by Mitch Albom, and it's death ends a life, but it doesn't end a relationship. And for many of us, we like to find ways to continue that bond with someone we love. This can be really difficult in the early weeks and months of loss. It can be really hard to try and find any connection with them, or have a sense of them, because the grief is so present. It's so all-consuming. But as we integrate that loss, as we learn to carry it, as we grow around it, bit by bit, other memories, not just their death, but other memories start to come back. And it's like we almost get them back again in our memories, in the way we can relate to them again. It's a lovely way of just, finding meaning, and also just connecting with them and continuing that relationship. When my dad died a few years ago during COVID, we had bird feeders outside the window. And after he died, I went and bought bird feeders and put them outside my window here. And every time I see the birds at them, I think of him. And that's just one of the ways that I continue a bond with him. So maybe think about ways that might be accessible to you to continue a bond. So that in a nutshell is a little bit about grief and grief theory. And I want to share and move on now to look at trauma. So what's the difference? What is trauma? And often when we've been bereaved by suicide, we are carrying both grief and trauma. And I hope I can speak in a way that's clear and accessible. Forgive me if I don't. I'm trying to avoid jargon. But like I said, please do go back over it again and again, if this information is helpful to you. So in a nutshell, trauma happens when we have a very distressing event that's so extreme or so intense that they overwhelm our ability to cope. And this can have a lasting negative impact, not necessarily an everlasting negative impact, but a lasting impact that goes on. When trauma is present, there may be additional needs. We need to make sure maybe that someone hasn't already gone through a trauma, because another loss can activate that, or make it harder to deal with. Trauma, the response to trauma can be processed and integrated in time, and often with the right support. Trauma can really impact the grieving process. It disrupts our capacity to process the loss in a coherent way. It often can leave the bereaved frozen or hyper aroused. This means it's like, we're quite hyper vigilant. That means we're on the lookout for threat. We're anxious. We're looking out to see, is the world safe? Is this person safe? Am I okay right now? It's like our body's alarm system. Somebody's taken a sledgehammer to it. The alarm is going off and we cannot find the button to switch it off. We can also feel quite disconnected from an emotional experience. And in traumatic bereavement, such as a sudden death or a violent death or an untimely death, our assumptive world is shattered. So I talked earlier about our assumptions for the future. We just assume that everyone's going to be there tomorrow. And that's part of our assumptive world. And when they aren't, that assumptive world is shattered, which can leave us feeling really like this Lego man on the left-hand side. When our assumptive world is shattered, it can leave us really in a crisis of safety, a crisis of identity. Who am I now? What does this mean? And a crisis of meaning that's much greater than a typical grief response. So it's like a grief response with the volume right up, and we're feeling it in every cell of our body, not just sadness in our heart. It's really important to understand that trauma is subjective. So different people, that means it's our own personal experience. Different people can experience the exact same event, like a car crash, for example, and there can be two passengers in the back, and one can get out and brush themselves down and be okay, and the other person may get reoccurring flashbacks of what happened and experience trauma in their body, and ongoing difficulties. So trauma is very much my relationship to what has happened. So for everybody in a family, that can be very different, very subjective. Everyone can experience it differently. Trauma is sensory based. It's not something we make up in our head, although the stories we tell ourselves can add to it. But trauma is very much in our bodies, in our nervous system. It's easily triggered. You know, we know that word. It's overused nowadays, but in this case, it's the right word to use. And it can take us back to the event, to the death, or a memory. And we can relive those events as if they're happening now in the present moment, which can cause fear and distress. And this is why I invited you earlier to, think about something to hold, something to look at, a sensory-based aid to have here. I forgot to mention as well, there's a little symbol to the bottom left of the screen here. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little thing. I don't know what that is, but it's covering it. But that symbol, it's Sanskrit, and it means breathe. And so I put the symbol for breathe on every slide tonight, just as a reminder to all of us to stay in our bodies, to stay grounded, to keep breathing as we're going through, this heavy topic, right, for many of us. I've also very intentionally brought some images from nature, some flowers, onto many, many of the slides. And again, it's just a little sensory aid for you, so that with every slide, as we're talking about difficult things, there's something to look at. Maybe you can imagine the smell or imagine what they feel like. I'm just looking at my next slide here, which has magnolia on it. So we'll come to that. So trauma is sensory-based. It's in the body, which makes sense that we support it in a sensory manner, or we support it from the bottom up, if you like. So anything that's a bottom-up approach means we're using the body. Anything that's a top-down approach means we're using the mind. And usually we need, the top-down to make sense of the bottom-up. And when they come together, that's what we call integration. So trauma is easily triggered, as I said, and it's easy to feel like we might be reliving it. I really want you to go away with this hope tonight. We do use the word recovery for trauma. So this alarm system that's activated in the body does not have to stay that way. We can and do recover from trauma. But for grief, we don't really get over grief, right? We talk more about adapting to loss. I guess in many ways, it's like an amputation. We're changed by an amputation. We learn to live with it. We can do many good things despite the amputation, but we don't get over it. We adapt to it. And it can be very similar in bereavement. When someone very dear to us has died, we adapt to life without them. We don't get over them. Is trauma inevitable after suicide? It's not inevitable. It's very, very common, but it's not inevitable. Remember, it's subjective. It's my personal experience with what's happened. The meaning we make of the death is key in whether we experience trauma or not. So many of you will probably identify that as the weeks and months go on, maybe even the years, we're often trying to make sense. We're trying to make meaning. We're trying to find a story or a narrative about what happened that feels like we can live with it. This story or this meaning that we make is really, really important, because it can direct us onto a trajectory of hope for our future, depending on the story, or it can put us on a trajectory of despair. But it is subjective, which means in time, as we learn more about this, there is an element of choice that can appear in terms of which trajectory we're going to orient towards. There's a huge potential for our whole worldview to change after catastrophic loss. And it's really normal that the world can feel like a very unsafe place. Confirmation bias is something that we all have. So if we think the world is unsafe and that people aren't trustworthy or aren't reliable, or that nobody gets it right and no one understands what I'm going through, our confirmation bias is probably going to make us feel really unsupported, abandoned, and unsafe. So losing somebody that we love can really increase these feelings, leading to even more hypervigilance. So when we're hypervigilant and worried and looking around and who's safe and who do I want near me, and then, maybe somebody says the wrong thing and it goes, yeah, you see, everybody says the wrong thing, nobody gets this. And we end up sort of stuck in a loop that's just confirming that the world is an unsafe place. That's not very helpful for us, because when our bodies feel really unsafe, we continue to live in hypervigilance. We continue to have that internal red alarm system always on. And it's hard to be, it's hard to go about our daily life with that alarm constantly ringing. So what many of us do is we try to avoid it. I'll come more to avoidance because this is a really important word when we're talking about trauma. So how does trauma present itself? So remember, I said it's very much a bottom-up experience. It's in the body. So a significant negative event happens, such as the death of a loved one. Trauma may include very strong memories or flashbacks of the event, but not always. There may be intrusive thoughts or unwanted thoughts that play over in our mind. We may avoid situations, people, places that cause us to remember the event. We may avoid thinking about it or talking about the traumatic event or the traumatic meaning that I've made of the event. And it's really important to know that even a gentle death can sometimes lead to trauma in the body if something is perceived as traumatic, if I make meaning of it. If my brain makes meaning of something, I can actually experience trauma even when somebody has had a gentle death. So we may experience the world through these heightened emotions. And like I said, perceiving threat may be where there isn't any. So on a good day, somebody might say something a bit insensitive, but on a good day, I can let it go. I can forgive them. I can ignore it because my body's quite relaxed. But if I'm hyper aroused, if my alarm system is fully up, if I'm hyper vigilant, the slightest insensitive word from someone else or a look can really, really increase my sense of threat in my body. Many people can experience trauma after exposure to an extreme event, but most people somehow metabolize this trauma. Most people, in time, it eases, it gets better, it reduces. And the more we talk about it, the more we, have this experience in our bodies and talk about it from our brains down and breathe through it and stay in our senses and acknowledge this is a feeling from the past that doesn't belong here, it can ease over time. Sorry, just trying to go forward here. Here we go. Often we suppress these feelings and avoid them. Of course we do, right? If we think about an event from the past and it causes us distress, we're going to reject it. We're going to put it away. We're going to get busy. But that leaves it unprocessed in our system. And the more we suppress something, the more intrusive it becomes. And we end up in this cycle. I'll just move on here. It can lead to this really overactive stress response, leaving us constantly scanning people and places for potential danger. And if we're scanning people looking for danger, we tend to find it. It's that confirmation bias again. So we get aroused because we have this memory, and then we try to avoid it by keeping busy or not talking about it. And then it intrudes on us. It's there anyway, which makes us even more aroused in our body, which makes us try to avoid it, which makes it intrusive. So you see how we get caught in these loops and it doesn't get resolved. It stays in our system. This is why we have to be really wary of avoidance. It's like it might help us in that moment, but it's really not helping us over time. Somebody that I supported once had this lovely analogy. She said, she was British, so she called it an airing cupboard. She said, it's like my airing cupboard is full of these towels and sheets, and people keep throwing sheets and towels at me, but there's no space for them. I've no more room for anything to come in. And after we'd worked together over a period of time, and she processed and integrated some of the memories of the loss she had experienced, she said, this is the best picture I could get, but she said, it's like everything has its place inside me now, and there's space for more things to go in there. So I think that's just a lovely analogy of what it can feel like when we're experiencing trauma in our bodies. Now, it's really normal after loss of any kind to feel overwhelmed, to have intrusive thoughts, to ruminate, have difficulty sleeping. Grief can be really brutal, and over time it integrates. But we find with trauma that it's like grief with the volume turned right up, and it can take a lot longer to process. And it's, like I said, it's more in the body. So for most people, these distressing symptoms do settle with time. But for about a third of people, symptoms don't settle. And when I say time, it's really arbitrary. 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. But over time, symptoms do settle, like the flashbacks, the rumination. But for some people, they don't. And that can lead to PTSD or depression. Having suicidal ideation is very, very common after bereavement, especially if you've been bereaved by suicide. Self-harm or substance might happen if it doesn't settle. So it's so important to seek support because, as I said earlier, grief does become much more manageable over time, but it does linger. It's there. It's part of being human, loving and grieving. But trauma does not have to linger. It doesn't have to stay with you over time. So I really want you to take hope and take comfort in that fact. Traumatic grief is described, it's how the trauma experienced after the death impacts the natural grieving process. So grief needs our body and our mind to be processed. It needs the body to sob and heave and cry and yearn and lament and mourn for the person that we love who has died. And it needs our head to make sense of this and acknowledge that grieving is normal and give us permission to go through this. But if trauma has got in there and is freezing things and keeping us stuck in loops of avoidance or memories from the past, it's really hard for this grieving process to move forward. So trauma can really impact the natural grieving process, which in turn leads to more trauma symptoms. So it can also lead to developing some mental health issues if we don't get the help that's available to us. It can be really hard to distinguish between a typical grief response and a traumatic grief response. But we generally see that the difficulties with a traumatic grief response are persistent. They are severe. They don't let up. We don't have those breaks. The impact can be debilitating. It's hard, really hard to re-engage with life. It's hard to rebuild. There's a lot of struggle and the impact is really big. And sometimes there's even risk. I want to just briefly touch on PTSD in case it's helpful to anybody here. But PTSD can feel like it's like our body and our mind have been hijacked by unwanted sensations and unwanted thoughts. And it's very difficult to move forward. Flashbacks of the event or of learning about the event can be frequent and unmanageable, and intrusive thoughts or rumination that's going over it again and again, or thinking about something when we don't want to, can feel really unmanageable. The stress response, so that hypervigilance, that feeling hyper aroused, or that alarm is on in our bodies, that can go on long after the event. And then any sort of sensory exposures to the event that remind us of the death can really cause a reactivation of this traumatic state in our bodies. So here's where the subjective nature of it can come in as well. If we allow our thoughts to believe that the world is unsafe, believe that people are unreliable, this can really contribute to ongoing hypervigilance, as I said earlier. We can live with a pervasive, like, oh, it's there all the time, state of fear and helplessness and distrust. And this can really lead to intensifying all these symptoms, which lead to more stress and more suffering. So I hope I'm making it clear that sometimes the way we think about things and the beliefs we allow take hold in our mind can really keep us on these loops of suffering. We can become stuck in a loop of intrusive symptoms followed by avoidance strategies. And as I said earlier, the more we avoid and push down, the more intrusive it becomes. The more intrusive it becomes, the more we get activated. The more we get activated, the more we try to suppress and avoid, and the more intrusive it becomes. So we start going through these loops, and that's why it goes on and on and on. We need to find ways to step off the wheel, step out of the loop, break that cycle, break that loop. And I will talk about ways. So who's vulnerable to experiencing trauma? Certainly neurodivergence, any of us with a sensitive nervous system, any of us with a history of mental health. Maybe we've been through a really difficult experience already, and this is layered on top. Maybe our loved one had a difficult few years before they died. It's not always the case, but maybe, for example, if we're living with somebody with extreme mental health issues or with addiction issues, we can often be in a state of hyperarousal for months or even years. Or if we're in a caring role, we can be in a state of hyperarousal for years. So a distressing event on top of this can cause trauma. Social support. So either we don't have enough social support, or we don't let in the social support that's there. I can do it myself. People are unreliable. I don't want them around. I don't want them to see me vulnerable. These are all really unhelpful things. I mean, I'm your worst enemy here, but it's really, really unhelpful most of the time to not let people in, because good social support, good relationships are our biggest protective factor through these hard times. Okay, I hope you're all doing okay. Don't forget, if you have something sensory with you, such as a little candle, something to hold in your hand and move, something to smell as we're talking, that can really help you to stay grounded and present. And also don't forget the little symbol of breathe in Sanskrit. So these intrusive symptoms, we say intrusive because we don't choose this. We don't want this. These feelings are here, and people just want to get back to normal, or when I'm through this, when this will go away, next month it'll be better, in 6 months it'll be better. We want to get back to our baseline, but that doesn't happen often. We find a new baseline. So our ability to cope is overwhelmed, and this can manifest in so many ways. As I've said, maybe there's flashbacks. Maybe our heart is racing or pumping in our chest. Maybe we're sweating more, or our body starts to tremble, or we're really emotional, like really emotional and really distressed with the emotion. We can sometimes feel fear or helplessness. Sometimes we can feel horror. Sometimes we have nightmares, reoccurring nightmares, or sleep interruptions. Sometimes we can have a lot of unwanted, intrusive memories or intrusive thoughts. And it's really important, like I did at the beginning of this slide, that we orient ourselves to the here and now. Looking around the room, can I find 5 things that are green? So it's like I'm taking my brain off that neural pathway that's causing the distress, the memories, and I'm creating a new one by counting backwards in Spanish from 20, 19, 18, finding 5 green things in the room, the plant, the rug, the book. So when I'm doing these things, I'm literally, it's like, in a train station, you change the track and the train goes in a different way. In our minds, it can be super helpful if we're experiencing any of these intrusive thoughts or intrusive sensations in our body, that we breathe through it, we recognize it's from a time in the past, we're safe now, and we change the track to thinking about something right here, right now. A beautiful way to come into the right here, right now is through the senses: smell, sight, sound, touch, taste. Or we can press our feet into the floor and just feel the ground beneath our feet and just anchor ourselves, wiggle our bums in our chairs, anchor ourselves in the present moment. When these things are happening in our mind, they're not true. It's just like computer software that's gone awry. Our brains are desperately trying to process the overwhelming memories, the overwhelming event that's happened. Our brain is just trying to find a way to process it. So if we can breathe through it, ground ourselves, anchor ourselves, and create a different pathway in the present moment while we're having these unpleasant sensations, that can really help us to integrate the past with the present. So avoidance, let's have another little look at this. It's a clever strategy, but it can lead to isolation because we stop seeing people, we stop going out. It can really disrupt the processing of the events. So if my brain is trying to process these difficult events, but I avoid anything that reminds me of it, my brain's not going to have a chance to process it. And I'm kicking it down the road for another day. Ideally, we want to sit with it and be able to process it and integrate it and, metabolize it. When we eat something that's gone off or that's bad for us or that, just doesn't suit us, it's really unpleasant, but our bodies have to metabolize it in the same way our brains have to try and metabolize this. So avoidance decreases our tolerance and decreases our capacity to experience the pain of loss. Whereas when we orient towards the pain, and it might sound counterintuitive, but when we actually orient towards the pain, allow ourselves to feel the pain of grief, of loss, we metabolize it, we expand our capacity for it, and it becomes easier to hold. Avoidance means we're much more likely to become triggered. We retreat even further, we isolate even further, and we end up creating a very, very shrunken life for ourselves. So allowing ourselves to feel the distress without trying to escape it increases our capacity to experience the pain of loss. I'm going to just skip a couple of slides because I'm just aware of time. The loneliness of this is really important to acknowledge as well. So where do we even start? If trauma can be healed, grief is something we learn to carry, we learn to live with, we adapt to our loss and find a way to carry it and to live with it like an amputation. But trauma, we don't have to limp along with trauma. We can do things to turn off that alarm that's got activated in our nervous system. So sometimes and often we actually need help to integrate these intrusive images or these thoughts from the past. Our mind can be flooded with distressing images, and they're just simply events that haven't been processed by the brain. So they're stuck in the body in sensory form or emotional form, rather than being stored in our brain like a filing system of memories, and that have stories and parts of things that happened in our lives. So we need to try and help the brain and the body to integrate these intrusive images into a story. Because when we have a story and a narrative for what's happened, we can file it away better. Our brain can file it away better. I often say to people, it's like, if your brain is an office that's running smoothly, there's filing cabinets, you're there, you're looking out the window, everything's calm, and suddenly somebody opens the door and throws in a pile of, lever arch folders that break everywhere and everything spills out. And I'm down on the floor and I'm trying to pick this up and figure out where everything goes. And something else is thrown in and something else is thrown in. And before I know it, I'm sitting on the floor and the office is just strewn full of stuff. And I've no idea where everything is or how to file it away. And this is really like trauma in the brain. And often when someone can come in and sit alongside us, maybe a therapist, maybe a good friend, maybe a partner, a family member, sometimes a random neighbor that we barely knew before, can be super helpful. But just somebody sitting alongside us, helping us to talk about these files, pick them up, make sense of them, put them away in their place on the shelf. Suddenly, before we know it, we're integrating that trauma. So it's not just intrusive feelings in my body anymore, but it's starting to be filed away in my brain as memories. So this is why talking about it, feeling it, and making the top down meet the bottom up so that it can integrate and become a narrative, a story, an experience that can be filed away is how we process trauma. This can be done with a therapist who's trauma-informed, but we really need to feel safe with them and feel like we're in good hands. And when we're telling the story of the death and making sense of it and finding our story, it's really important that we use our body, our grounding in the present moment, our breath, our anchoring, our senses to stay in the present. So we're holding the past and the memories and processing them, but from a very present place. This is really hard, but building a social network, having people around you is really helpful. It helps us feel safe. We might be annoyed with them all for a period of time. Maybe they say silly things. Maybe they're insensitive, but actually it's one of the biggest protective factors to helping us integrate our loss and live a meaningful life again. It can be friends, family, community. It can be, in a HUGG bereavement support group. It can be with people you've never met before. It can be with old friends. Maybe it's a choir, something totally unrelated to your loss. But being around people, and ironically, the last thing we want to do when we're vulnerable is be around people, but being around people can be our biggest protective factor. Staying connected, staying in relationship, allowing people in despite the times where they get it wrong. If people haven't lived through this experience, it's not that they don't care, they simply don't have the capacity to know how to support in a helpful way. It's something that they have to learn, just how we need to learn how to grieve and learn about this process. They need to learn and grow with the process of supporting somebody as well. There is professional support. These are some of the trauma-informed professional supports out there: cognitive processing therapy, EMDR, narrative exposure therapy. And some of the bottom-up approaches would be sensory motor psychotherapy or internal family systems, or somatic experiencing. I have that on another slide later. Don't forget, this is recorded, so you can go back to this at another time. There is a time and a place also for medication. I'm not a GP. I can't tell you when that time and place is, but there is a time and place for it. Psychoeducation, I know for me, when I'm going through something very, very difficult, I need to learn about it. I want to find other people who've walked the path in front of me. How did they do this? How did they make this more manageable? I want to learn what's happening in my body and in my mind and why. I want to identify what are helpful ways of coping, even if it's forcing myself out to a choir every Monday night, and what are less helpful ways of coping. Maybe when I'm not going out at all, I refuse to go to the supermarket anymore. I won't let anybody into my house. So we need to understand, what's helpful and what's unhelpful. We need to understand what triggers us. What things are we avoiding because they're triggering us? Maybe we need to let ourselves be triggered so that we can breathe into it and increase our capacity to hold these difficult emotions, because it's the only way that we will eventually metabolize them. We need to celebrate when we don't avoid things, when we go out, even if it's only for an hour. And we need to celebrate when we end up sitting with a painful emotion that we'd normally have avoided, but we sit there, we sob, we breathe through anxiety, we increase our ability to hold these emotions. It's the only way to increase the ability is to actually feel them in the first place. So we need to keep finding ways to increase our tolerance and our capacity for distressing situations. And then developing coping strategies. Again, I wish there was a magic wand, but these are all the things that we hear all the time. Are we sleeping? Are we eating well? Are we moving our bodies? Are we allowing ourselves, and you are absolutely allowed to feel moments of joy, moments of rest, moments of relaxation, to let that in. You are allowed. You're entitled to moments of ease in your day. And then having a toolbox of strategies for crisis moments, safe people, safe places where we can ring them and just cry on the phone and they get it. We have our grounding techniques. We know how to keep things slow and steady to help our bodies feel steady. We remember what I said earlier about, changing the track in our brains and finding sensory things in the present moment, finding, green things or blue things or orange things in the room, just to literally distract our brain from that distressing track that it can be on. And we need to celebrate the small wins. What else can help? Now, this is really important. Creating a sense of safety in my body. Deeply breathing, long exhales tells my body it's safe, that I'm safe. Creating a sense of calm, calming music, calming voices when we speak to each other, a tidy home, a sense of connectedness. Even if I don't want to talk to my friend, will you come over and make dinner? But I don't want to talk. Just having somebody there, a sense of control. It's really important. We can't control the death. So being able to control our day-to-day can help us just get that agency back. That is important. And it's okay to have hope. In fact, it's really important to have hope. And if you feel hopeless at the moment, find someone who can hold the hope alongside you. It is possible to find meaning again and even joy. We need to identify, and this could be journaling. All of this can be done in a journal. What activities help us to feel calm and connected to myself and connected to others? I need to find ways to find meaning and engage with life again. Can I forgive other people for not fully understanding what we're going through and make space for social connection and life again? This is a huge one I see all the time. It's like what we go through after profound loss throws us into an alternative reality, a different universe. And it's like it's so hard to bridge our new reality with the reality of everyone else's lives. But if we can keep a foot in there, keep a hand in there, let them come into our lives, take a peep every now and again up into theirs, but keep that connection. People will be insensitive. People will say the wrong thing. People will not know how to be with you. And I'm really sorry that this is the case, because it can cause so much pain. But in a way, not only do we have to learn how to do this, the grieving, integrating our loss, learning how to metabolize and integrate trauma, but we also end up having to educate the people around us in the ways that they can best support us. I'm coming to the last of the slides now. I just wanted to share this, and I know that Arlene is going to share this on a later slide as well. There are trauma-informed therapists out there. They can be hard to find. It can take a lot of ringing around and asking for recommendations. But generally, somebody who's been trained in somatic experiencing or sensory motor psychotherapy, or who's done other training maybe that I haven't heard of. So that is one place that you can go to lean in. But also, well, just getting resources online. So there's the UK Trauma Council, super helpful, lots of information there. Self-compassion, there's evidence for that. If there isn't somebody available to hold us in a way that we need to be held, even putting our hands on our own heart, on our own chest, holding ourselves can actually impact our nervous system and help soothe the nervous system. So touching our own selves, using our own breath, doing our own meditation, our own self-compassion meditations with Tara Brach or Kristen Neff can really help. Psychoeducation, listening to podcasts. I have a podcast called Shapes of Grief. I also have a training program called Shapes of Grief. So some people like to learn, to understand what they're going through, or on the podcast, just listening to other people's experiences of loss and grief and how they navigated it. We can get tools from everything we listen to, right? Even if it's, oh, I wouldn't do it that way, or those 3 things were super helpful. So all the time we're learning and going through this process of adapting. There's a reason we're going through this. I mean, we don't just, like I said earlier, press a button and update and now we get on with our lives. We need to grieve so that we can come to terms with the reality of our loss. And our brain needs to experience the absence of our person over and over again until it updates to understand the reality that they have died and they're no longer with me. I need to learn how to live with the loss and feel the pain of grief. I need to learn how to live with loss in a manageable way and a healthy way that's not going to harm me. And that might include new friendships, new interests. I need to learn how to be in a world where it seems that everything has changed. And this is the thing. It's like our internal world shatters and we experience the world not as the world is, but as we are. So if my internal self feels shattered, the world is going to feel like an unsafe and unpredictable place to me. So it makes sense that my healing begins inside of me, in the cells of my body. I need to re-engage with life without my lost loved one, and also learn how to forge a new relationship with them, a continuing bond. Who am I now in the aftermath of this profound loss? And who do I have to become to be able to carry this? Coming to accept the reality of our loss can take 6, 12, 18 months. Learning how to live with loss. We don't forget them. We don't move on. We don't heal. We learn to accommodate our loss, to adapt to it, to grow around it. Our sense of self often goes through a huge period of readjustment. We have to learn to live with loss in a manageable and healthy way, which might include new friendships, new hobbies, new interests. We're recreating a new baseline, learning how to be in the world when it seems that everything has changed. This involves internal psychological processes and also social changes. We need to re-engage with life without our loved one, but also form that new relationship with them. The pain will never go away completely, but eventually it does become different. And Fiona is testament to that. Softer. It becomes woven into who I am. It no longer controls every breath. I learned to live again. I learned to love again. And I even learned to laugh again. So they're the words of Iris Bolton. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope some of that was useful. And like I said, there will be a recording. Please take what was helpful and ignore the rest. And I might just call Arlene or Fiona on now, just for a moment.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Liz. There's just amazing information there you've shared with us. And as you say, I'm glad that we've recorded this because there's lots of information for us to digest. It's hugely helpful. And I'm sure everybody on this call will find nuggets of information that are applicable to them where they're at now, or maybe they're supporting somebody who find this information really, really useful. So thank you so much, Liz. Really appreciate that. It was fantastic. Arlene, I don't know if you wanted to come in with any comment that you wanted to share from people just before we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, most people have found exactly what Fiona said, found it very helpful, was very insightful, an excellent presentation. And one person in particular said that they were going to practice that tip that you gave about finding something right here, right now, through the senses to bring me out of my thinking mind and into the present. So thank you for that.
Oh, brilliant. We unfortunately have run out of time for questions, and I'm conscious that people need to digest and come back into themselves. So maybe I'd ask you, Liz, if you want to, in closing, maybe give us something so that we can close off this session and safely sort of go about the rest of our evening so that we can kind of go back, as you say, come back into our body and our senses because it is difficult, when we're in pain and grieving to take in a lot of this information, and some of it can be triggering and can really arouse our senses. So is there a little practice perhaps you could give us before we say goodnight? Just got to unmute yourself there, Liz.
Sure, and my apologies for going over time so that we didn't get a chance to do questions. If you remember back to the slide where I shared the dual process where we confront our loss and then we put it away and we move forward and maybe make dinner or have a bath or do the groceries. So this oscillation into loss and forward with restoration, experiencing our loss, forward into restoration. Now is the time to move forward. So for a lot of the information that we shared this evening, it's a lot about grief. As you said, Fiona, people might be quite activated. It is okay to put this away now. Close off the laptop, close off the phone, put it away, and orient yourself towards something completely different. It might be washing the dishes. It might be splashing cold water on your face. It might be lighting a scented candle, but something sensory, maybe going to a pet, asking a loved one for a hug. But like I said, getting used to just putting things away and, pressing forward with something different. Maybe going out into the garden and feeling a wet leaf against your face, or just taking in the smells of the night air, listening to the sounds of the evening, and just letting yourself come into your body in a safe way through your senses. It can really help you feel grounded in the present moment. If you want, Fiona, I have a little finishing guided meditation that might take a little minute. Just if anybody feels they'd like to go through that.
Sure. Yeah, that might be really helpful to us.
Is there anything you want to say before we go through that, or will you come in at the end?
Well, I'll finish off now. Arlene's going to show some slides at the very end with the information on how to contact people, how to contact us. So that will run after you finish this guided meditation, so people can write down notes. This, of course, is recorded, so they'll get it in the recording as well. And they can always come back onto our website and get any information they may have missed or any additional information they might need. So please, please don't feel unsupported. We are here for you, and we will be here for you, each and every day. So please do get in touch with us. So Liz, we'll say goodnight to you. We'll switch off our cameras and let you finish off with a guided meditation. And thank you very much again
Thank
for
you.
this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks to Arlene. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm going to just do a guided meditation. It'll take a minute or two. Stay if it's helpful. And Arlene will be sharing some slides. Feel free to share them now if you like, Arlene, while I'm talking. So we'll just take a moment now just to each come back to ourselves, gently relaxing our eyes if that feels comfortable, simply just softening our gaze. The invitation is to take a slow, deep breath in through your nose and let it out through your mouth. And do that just a few times. Feel the weight of your body supported by the chair you're sitting in or the ground you're standing on, nice and solid. And just allow yourself to notice your breath moving in and out. Quiet rhythm, that's all you have to do right now. You might like to bring your attention to a place that's real or imagined where you feel completely at ease. For me, it's somewhere in nature. For you, it could be a room or simply a sense within your own heart. If you can, notice the colors, the sounds, and the temperature that's there. Let your body remember what it feels like to be at ease. If any tension lingers, shake it out. Let it roll off you. Loosen up your jaw. Let it out in your exhale, releasing it to the earth. Let it be held for you by the earth. And as you breathe in again, just drawing in a sense of calm and a sense of compassion for yourself. And when you're ready, bring some movement back to your hands and feet. Take one more deep breath. And know that you can return to that safe place inside yourself whenever you need to. So good night. Take really good care of yourselves. And thank you so much for your attention this evening. Mind yourselves.